Okay, Chai, let us begin. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militan Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagujatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostite Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvya Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So let's go to our memorization verse for the week, chapter 10, text 11. Tesham mevanukampartam aham agyanajam tama nashayam yatma bhavasto jnanadipena bhashvata. Again. Tesham evanukampartam aham agyanajam tamaha nashayam yatma bhavasto jnanadipena bhashvata. Show them special mercy, I dwelling in their hearts. Destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. I give the understanding, that's my mercy. I give the understanding, that's my mercy. I give the understanding to my devotees so that they can come to me. Jai. Okay, let's go back to chapter 15. And we are picking up on text 2. Krishna is talking about the banyan tree of this material existence. And has its roots upward, its branches down, and its leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas. That's what we read yesterday. So let us know this tree. And then we can know the Vedas because we can know the goal of the Vedas, that all of the Vedas are meant to break our attachment to this tree, help us cut down this tree and shift our focus from the reflection to the reality and the ultimate reality of Krishna. Okay, so text 2. Adash chodvam prashris tas tasya shaka guna pravridha vishaya pravalaha adascha mulanyanusantatani karmanubandini manushya loke. Aruna, would you like to read?
Yes, I can read. Translation. The branches of this tree extend downwards and upward, nourished by three modes of material nature. The twigs are the objects of the senses. This tree also has the roots going down, and these are bound to the fruitive action of human society. Purport. The description of the banyan tree is further explained here. Its branches spread in all directions. In the lower parts, there are variegated manifestations of the living entities, human beings, animals, horses, cows, dogs, cats, etc. These are situated on the lower parts of the branches, whereas on the upper parts are higher forms of living entities, the demigods, Gandharvas, and many other higher species of life. As a tree is nourished by water, so this tree is nourished by the three modes of material nature. Sometimes we find that the tract of land is barren for want of sufficient water, and sometimes tract is very green. Similarly, where particular modes of material nature is proportionality greater in quantity, The different species of life are manifested accordingly. The twigs of trees are considered to be the sense objects. By development of the different modes of nature, we develop different senses, and by the senses, we enjoy different varieties of sense objects. The tip of the branches are the senses, the ears, nose, eyes, etc., which are attached to the enjoyment of different sense objects. The twigs are sound, form, touch, and so on, the sense objects. The subsidiary roots are attachment and aversions, which are byproducts of different varieties of suffering and sense enjoyment. The tendencies towards piety and impiety are considered to develop from these secondary roots, which spread in all directions. The real root from Brahmaloka and other roots are in the human planetary system. After one enjoys the results of virtuous activities in the upper planetary systems, he comes down to this earth and renews his karma or fruitive activities for promotion. This planet of human being is considered the field of activities.
Okay, thank you very much. So here we're getting some very useful information about how to deal with this banyan tree of our material existence. So he's saying that the branches go upward and downward. That means that in the human form of life, we have a choice whether to elevate ourselves or degrade ourselves. So human beings are somewhere in the middle. And depending on how we act, if we follow Vedic injunctions, then we can promote ourselves to a higher form of life, right? He's saying that the demigods, Gandharvas, higher species of life on the higher planets, that it's possible that we can elevate ourselves to these higher forms of life. And if we disregard the Vedic injunctions and act like we heard about, oh no, we didn't hear about that. We'll hear about that in chapter 16, about the demoniac nature, act like little demons here in the material world, then we're going to degrade ourselves and go to the lower branches, animals and insects and the other 8 million species of life that are non-human. So all these possibilities are there because the branches are going up and down. So if you're in a tree and the branches are going up and down, you can either climb up or you can climb down. So these are our options. You can also go laterally, different experiences in the human form. And then he says, what is keeping this tree alive? What's nourishing the tree is the 3 modes of material nature. So that's what we just read about in the last chapter. And it's very interesting that as long as we're acting under the influence of the 3 modes of material nature, we're basically feeding these modes, and these modes are in turn feeding our material existence and perpetuating our material existence. So that's why Krishna was emphasizing the need to transcend the modes, because as soon as we can transcend the modes of nature, we're no longer acting within the modes. And so basically those modes aren't influencing us. They're not nourishing our banyan tree. And then the result is that the banyan tree is going to start, starving or drying up because no one's watering it. It's not getting any water. It's not getting any light. It's not getting any fertilizer. It can't grow. So it starts to, wither, and the leaves fall off and the branches fall off and it starts to die. So that's a good thing. When our material existence starts to wind up, starts to fade off into, starts to diminish, then that's good because spiritual life can become strong when we're getting out of the clutches, out of the entanglement of material life. And but it's saying that the twigs are the objects of the senses. So the twigs, when you see how a tree grows, the branches, and then as it's growing, it makes new twigs. And then on the end of each new twig, there's like new buds and new shoots and more, which produce new twigs and more buds and more leaves and more shoots and new twigs. So as long as we keep chasing after the objects of the senses, then there's going to be more and more twigs. In other words, this tree is going to keep on growing. It's going to just keep extending and extending and extending and building more up and down branches and roots and everything. It's becomes more complex. We become more entangled. So if we don't chase after the objects of the senses, then it's going to stop growing and it's going to start being just kind of stunted. It's going to become like a bonsai tree, stunted little tree. which is nothing to contend with, right? It's just small. So this is part of the strategy here for cutting down this tree, that we stop nourishing it with the modes of nature by transcending the modes, and then the tree becomes weak because it's not being nourished. And then we stop chasing after sense gratification in the material world, and that means that no more twigs are growing. So it gets stunted, and it also gets, malnourished. So the tree becomes small and it becomes weak. And then that makes it easier for us to cut it down. So that's what Krishna is going to talk about here in the next verses. How we're going to cut this tree down, because, okay, tree is not growing anymore, and it's not getting stronger. It's getting weaker day by day, but at the same time, it's still a big tree. So we need to have an axe to cut down this tree. So to see, Krishna is going to tell us, what is that axe? So let's go to text 3 and 4. Narupamasye hatatapalabhyate nanto nachadir nacha sampratishta ashvattamenam suvirudhamulam asanga shastrena dridena chitva tatapadam tatpadimargitavyam yasmin gatana nivartanti bhuyaha tameva chadyam purusham prapadye Yata pravritti prashrita purani. Right. Alia, would you like to read?
Yes. The real form of these three cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, or where its foundation is. But with determination, one must cut down the strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. Thereafter, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns, and there surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom everything began and from whom everything has extended since time immemorial. Purport. It is now clearly stated that the real form of this banyan tree cannot be understood in this material world. Since the root is upwards, the extension of the real tree is at the other end. When entangled with the material expansions of the tree, one cannot see how far the tree extends, nor can one see the beginning of this tree. Yet one has to find out the cause. I am the son of my father is the son of such and such, a person, etc. By searching in this way, one comes to Brahma, who is generated by Garbhodakasha Vishnu. Finally, in this way, when one reaches the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that is the end of the research work. One has to search out that origin of this tree, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, through the association of persons who are in knowledge of that Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then, by understanding, one becomes gradually detached from these false reflections of reality. And by knowledge, one can cut off the connection of actually become situated in the real tree. The word Sangha, excuse me, is very important in this connection because the attachments for sense enjoyment and lording it over the material nature is very strong. Therefore, one must learn the detachment by discussion of spiritual science based on authoritative scriptures, and one must hear from persons who are actually in knowledge. As a result of such discussion, in the association of the bodies, one comes to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then the first thing one must be is surrender to Him. The description of that place whence, having gone, never return to this false reflected tree is given here. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the original root from whom everything has emanated. To gain the favor of that personality of Godhead, one has only to surrender, and this is a result of performing devotional service by hearing, chanting, etc. He is the cause of the extension of the material world. This is These are already being explained by the Lord himself. Aham sarvyasa bhava. I am the region of everything. Therefore, to get out of the entanglements of this strong banyan tree of material life, one must be surrendered to Krishna. As soon as one surrenders unto Krishna, one becomes detached automatically from this material extension.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, so Krishna's saying that it's really hard to see this banyan tree while we're in it. It's like this saying that you can't see the forest for the trees, right? So while we're in the middle of this tree, we can't see, all we see is just the immediate thing. Like we're seeing, some twigs, some leaves there, and we're absorbed there in that little space. And we can't see how big the tree is and where it begins, where it ends, where it comes from. So we need to get a perspective. We need to get some perspective, a broader perspective than we have on our own, which means we need to take knowledge from those who can see more broadly. And that's basically the definition of a Brahmana, right? A Brahmana is someone who's broad-minded. Broad-minded means they can see and think out of their little, box that they're in. Because most of us are like horses with blinders on. You've seen the horse, they have these things here, so they can't see side to side, so they don't get distracted. And so they can just walk in a straight line down the road without running after the grass on the side of the road or getting disturbed by anything else that may be there. So we're just like very zeroed in our little lives, like this is my house and this is my job and this is my family and this is my car and this is my list of things that I need to do today. And I'm the center of my little universe and this is all important because it's my thing. And what everybody else is doing out there in the universe, who cares, right? We don't know and we can't even know because it's just beyond our ability to understand. So we need to hear from scriptures, from guru, from sadhus about the nature of this world. And that's what we're doing here, right? We're hearing about this situation that we're living in. It's a huge tree and this is what it is. And it says that even though we may not be able to find out where it begins or where it ends, still we need to figure out how to cut it down. And we need to be very determined because determination is required because it's not easy, right? It's a difficult job. It's strongly rooted. It says here, su virudha mulam. The roots are very strongly fixed. But it can be chopped down with the weapon of detachment, right? Asanga shastrena. Shastre, there's Shastra means weapon and asanga means detachment. So how do we get this weapon of detachment? In other words, how do we become detached from material world? So Srila Prabhupada mentions two ways here in the purport. Did anyone catch those? Who can say one of those ways to get detached?
Devotional service?
To do some service?
The
Yeah,
devotional service.
Devotional service. Okay,
Yes.
devotional service is the answer to all questions, right? Okay, yeah. Prabhupada specifically says in the beginning of the second paragraph. Well, he says it at the end of the first paragraph too. He says that by knowledge, that we need to get knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and then by understanding the Lord, then we can be detached from the false reflection by understanding the reality. And then he says the same thing in the beginning of the second paragraph. He says, one must learn detachment by discussion of spiritual science based on authoritative scriptures and by hearing from persons who are in knowledge. So we get detachment by knowledge. Right? When we study the scriptures and we hear from, devotees, advanced devotees who are well versed in the scriptures, then we get knowledge about the nature of this world and our lives in it, how we're eternal spiritual beings, but this world is temporary and miserable, and what are we doing here? And everything here ends up in frustration, and all of our things are temporary. So why are we wasting our time chasing after temporary things that just bring us more misery and frustration. So then by hearing about these things, we can develop a little bit of detachment, right? By knowledge. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing he says in the last sentence of the purport, he says, second, he says, to get out of the entanglement of this strong banyan tree of material life, one must surrender to Krishna. As soon as one surrenders unto Krishna, one becomes detached automatically from this material extension. So that's the other thing. So the first thing is knowledge, and the second thing is surrender. When we surrender to Krishna, then he basically gives us detachment. He causes us to be detached, right? He imparts that knowledge from within the heart, and he frees us from the influence of the modes of nature, and he gives us, divine vision, spiritual vision, so we can see things clearly and we can understand this is not the place that we want to be, and we really need to be getting back home, back to Godhead, which is what he says here. So when we cut down the tree with the weapon of detachment, then when we're no longer attached to this material world, then what are we looking for? We're looking for the spiritual world. We're trying to figure out how to get back home, back to Godhead. So he says, thereafter, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns, which is the spiritual world, right? And yeah, so now he already gave us a little bit of a hint that there's a place beyond this banyan tree, there's a place beyond this material world. And it's a nice place where once you go there, you never return because, yeah, you don't want to come back to this place again. And now Krishna's going to start describing the spiritual world. Gives us a little bit of a glimpse into it here in Bhagavad Gita. So let's go to text 5. Nirmana moha jita sanga dosha adhyatma nitya vinivritta kamaha dvandvar vimukta sukha dukkha samgyar gachantyamudha padam avyayam tat. Who wants to read out there? We got
I can do it.
Lavanga, text
Yeah.
5.
All right. Those who are free from false pursuit, illusion, and false association, who understand the eternal, who are done with material life, who are free from the dualities of happiness and distress, and who, unbewildered, know how to surrender unto the Supreme Person, attain to that eternal kingdom. Purport. The surrendering process is described here very nicely. The first qualification is that one should not be deluded by pride. Because the conditioned soul is puffed up, thinking himself the lord of material nature, it is very difficult for him to surrender unto the personality of Godhead. One should know by the cultivation of real knowledge that he is not lord of material nature. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Lord. When one is free from delusion caused by pride, he can begin the process of surrender. For one who is always expecting some honor in this material world, it is not possible to surrender to the Supreme Person. Pride is due to illusion. For although one comes here, stays for a brief time, and then goes away, he has the foolish notion that he is the Lord of the world. He thus makes all things complicated, and he is in trouble. And he is always in trouble. The whole world moves under this impression. People are considering the land, this earth, to belong to human society, and they have divided the land under the false impression that they are the proprietors. One has to get out of this false notion that human society is the proprietor of this world. When one is freed from such a false notion, he becomes free from all the false associations caused by familiar, social, and national affections. These faulty associations bind one to this material world. After this stage, one has to develop spiritual knowledge. One has to cultivate knowledge of what is actually his own and what is actually not his own. And when one has an understanding of things as they are, he becomes free from all dual conceptions such as happiness and distress, pleasure and pain. he becomes full in knowledge, then it is possible for him to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so Krishna is saying here that in order to surrender to Krishna and go back home, back to Godhead, to that eternal kingdom, then there are some qualifications. But these qualifications are basically results of detachment, the detachment that we're talking about in the last verse that we get by cultivating knowledge and surrendering to Krishna. So yeah, because we're talking about this banyan tree, which is a reflection of the real tree. So there's a real world, the spiritual world, and then there's this reflection. So the tree that's reflected in the water, it looks like a real tree, but it's not a real tree. It's a false tree. And everything on that tree is false, right? False leaves, false branches, false fruits. It's just false. So when we become detached from this banyan tree of material existence, we get free from all the false things that are connected, all the false conceptions and false hopes and false desires and false association and false possessions and things that we were previously attached to in this false tree, which is part of the false existence, which is illusory existence, right? That's what illusion means, is that it's not real. So that's what Krishna is saying, that those who are free from false prestige, from illusion, which means false conception, from false association, who are done with material lust, which is actually false desires, right? Because the soul doesn't desire material sense gratification. So lust, which means material desire, is false desire. Who are freed from dualities of happiness and distress. That's also false, right? Because there's actually no duality for the soul. And yeah, so when we become detached and we cut down this false tree, then we get free from all the false things that go with it. And then when we're done, basically done, he says when we're done with material lust, when we're just done with all this falsity, then we're ready for the real thing. Then we become qualified to accept the real thing. But as long as we're clinging to the illusion, to the falsity, to this lie, basically, that we're living here, living the lie of material existence, thinking it's a real thing, real, like this is my real home, then we're ineligible to actually access reality. So yeah, that's why detachment is important. We need to let go of all these false associations and false conceptions and false impressions and false pride and false everything, everything false. We just need to just be done with it. And then we can embrace the reality. Okay. So now what is the reality? Krishna's going to say here in text 6. Natad basayate suryo nashashanko napavakaha yat gatva nanivartante taddama paramam mama. Draupadi, are you able to read text 6? Or else Divya? Oh, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I have it on the TV with my brother, so it's a little interesting. You said text 6?
Yeah.
Okay. That supreme abode of mine is not illuminated by the sun or moon, nor by fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world. Purport. The spiritual world, the abode of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, which is known as Krishna Loka, Goloka Vrindavan, is described here. In the spiritual sky, there is no need of sunshine, moonshine, fire, or electricity, because all the planets are self-luminous. We have only one planet in this universe, the sun, which is self-luminous, but all the planets in the spiritual sky are self-luminous. The shining effulgence of all those planets, called Vaikunthas, consists the shining sky known as the Brahmajyoti. Actually, the effulgence is emanating from the planet of Krishna, Goloka Vrindavan. Part of that shining effulgence is covered by the Mahatattva, the material world. Other than this, the major portion of that shining sky is full of spiritual planets, which are called Vaikunthas, chief of which is Goloka Vrindavan. As long as a living entity in this dark material world, he is in conditional life. But as soon as he reaches the spiritual sky, by cutting through the false, perverted tree of this material world, he becomes liberated. Then there is no chance of his coming back here. In his conditional life, the living entity considers himself to be the lord of this material world. But in his liberated state, he enters into the spiritual kingdom and becomes an associate of the Supreme Lord. There he enjoys eternal bliss, eternal life, and full knowledge. One should be captivated by this information. He should desire to transfer himself to that eternal world and extricate himself from this false reflection of reality. For one who is too much attached to this material world, it is very difficult to cut that attachment. But if he takes to Krishna consciousness, there is a chance of gradually becoming detached. One has to associate himself with devotees, those who are in Krishna consciousness. One should search out a society dedicated to Krishna consciousness and learn how to discharge devotional service. In this way, he can cut off his attachment to the material world. One cannot become detached from the attraction of the material world simply by dressing himself in saffron cloth. He must become attached to the devotional service of the Lord. Therefore, one should take it very seriously that devotional service, as described in the 12th chapter, is the only way to get out of this false representation of the real tree. In chapter 14, the contamination of all kinds of processes by material nature is described. Only devotional service is described as purely transcendental. The words paramamama are very important here. Actually, every nook and corner is the property of the Supreme Lord, but the spiritual world is paramam, full of 6 opulences. The Katha Upanishad 2:15 also confirms that in the spiritual world there is no need of sunshine, moonshine, or stars. Sanskrit. For the whole spiritual sky is illuminated by the internal potency of the Supreme Lord. That supreme abode can be achieved only by surrender and by no other means. You're still muted, Prabhupada Priya.
Jai. Thank you. So, Krishna is contrasting the material and spiritual worlds. So the material world is very different from the spiritual world in that it's a dark place. It's like, it's described in Bhagavatam as being like I think I described this before. It's like compared to like a coconut, and it's just a totally closed sphere with different layers of material coverings. And then because it's totally closed, it's like totally dark inside. And, so we become transferred into this closed, dark place. But Krishna is so kind that he puts a little light bulb in there in the form of the sun that lights up at least some parts of it. Some parts of it remain dark, but we're fortunate that we have the sun in our part of the universe. And but the spiritual world, it doesn't need a sun because it's self-luminous. Like everything there is self-luminous by Krishna's effulgence, because Krishna is everywhere. Krishna is present in Goloka Vrindavan, or he's present on other Vaikuntha planets by his expansions, different Vishnu expansions, Lord Ramachandra, Lord Nrsimhadev. They're all there on different Vaikuntha planets, and they're all effulgent. And not only are they effulgent, but everything is self-effulgent. The planets themselves are effulgent. The people on those planets are effulgent. The plants and animals on those planets are effulgent. Everything is just bright and beautiful. So there's no need for artificial light in the form of a sun, electricity, or anything else. And not only is it light in terms of like there being light, but it's light in terms of being illuminated by knowledge, right? Everybody in the spiritual world their consciousness is pure and self-illumined by their own knowledge, the spiritual knowledge, which is inherent in the soul. And it's also bright in the form of happiness, right? Like when someone says, I have a bright future, it means positive, right? I'm optimistic that I'm going to be happy. I'm going to be prosperous. I'm going to be successful. And my future is looking bright. So in that sense, also, it's bright. The spiritual world is a place where everything is bright. Every day is just bright because it's full of happiness and hope and excitement and enthusiasm, and everybody's just enlivened to serve Krishna at every moment and excited for the next moment, what's going to happen and how they're going to serve Krishna and how Krishna is going to reciprocate and all that. So that's what it means to enter into the spiritual kingdom and become an associate of the Supreme Lord. And Prabhupada says we enjoy eternal bliss, eternal life, and full knowledge. So in all these ways, it's bright, bright, illuminated with full knowledge, bright, illuminated with eternal bliss, and bright, and that there's no suffering, no sorrow, no loss, no death. So Prabhupada says one should be captivated by this information. We should be captivated. So Krishna is just giving a tiny little hint here about the spiritual world, which we can unpack, but he's just giving us a little bit of a glimpse, enough to be like, I want to know more, right? What is this place? He's talking about this place that's so good that when you go there, you never want to go anywhere else, right? You're like, this is it, final destination, nowhere else to go. And that place there's no darkness, there's no suffering, there's no death. What is that? I want to know more about this place. What is it like there? So for that, we need to read the Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam tells us all about the spiritual world in full detail, full living color, what happens there, what the environment is like in the Vaikunthas, in Goloka, everywhere. So we need to be captivated by this information, and so captivated that we are deeply inspired and enthused to learn more. And then the more we learn, the more we're going to be captivated and the more we're going to be attracted to going there. And then when we're very attracted to going there, then we're going to be willing to do anything to get there. Right? So that means just dedicating ourselves to serving Krishna, which is easy because we already know that this material world is not worth dedicating ourselves to. Why would I dedicate myself to something that's just temporary and miserable? Better I dedicate myself to something that's eternal and blissful and is going to lead me onward into more and more blissful situations. So, yeah, that's what Krishna is telling us here. And he says, so a key factor here, there's a couple more key factors that he's giving in terms of cutting that attachment to the material world. So when he said knowledge, too, he said surrender. And now he says that one has to associate with devotees. One has to search out a society dedicated to Krishna consciousness. So yeah, we need association. And that's why we have classes like this, so that we can get together and read the scriptures and discuss them and get each other's association and hopefully get inspired to make the break, to get a clean break from this material existence, cut down the banyan tree of entanglement and miserable situation. So search out a society dedicated to Krishna consciousness and learn how to discharge devotional service. So that's what Aruna was saying, devotional service. And the more we do devotional service, and the more we become attached to devotional service, then the more we become qualified to go to that place where everybody's just doing devotional service. Yeah, Lavanga?
So the other day, I was looking at the cave, and you see like a beautiful sky and mountains, and then below you see like the sky upside down, and it looks like the mountains are upside down, and it looks like if you walk into it, you're just gonna fall into the sky. But then somebody points out that that's a lake, and then afterwards I cannot unsee the lake. Like I saw the lake every single time. But if you're just looking at the picture, quite often you don't notice the lake. Like I heard to other people, they didn't notice the lake at all. And so you're talking about this world actually being a very dark place and stuff like that. I never really thought of it like that until I started hearing about it. And then I realized, yeah, it actually is very dark. You know, we have all these artificial lights in the cities and stuff, and the sun during part of the day. But actually, yeah, it is a very dark place. So it's like now I can't unsee that. Or I can't unsee some of this other stuff that you said because, like you pointed it out. So you also talking about having knowledge and association with devotees for cutting down this tree. That's what happens. It's like once they point it out, you can't unsee it.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, I remember when I first became a devotee, I read this verse, and then I was traveling, and we were in this place in the middle of the countryside, so there were no street lights, no artificial lights. It was just we're totally just in nature in a remote place, and it was nighttime. So we stepped out of the car and we closed the door, car lights off, and all of a sudden we were just plunged into just like darkness. And we're not used to that because we're used to there being street lights or something, it's just like total darkness. Literally, you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. It was that dark. And I was just like, wow, this is what the world is. It's just dark. It's totally dark. And if it wasn't for the sun, what would we do? Or moon or and I guess that must have been a cloudy, like moonless, starless night. It was like really like strangely dark. And yeah, I remembered this verse. And I was thinking, psh, we're in a really dismal, dark place here. Thank God Krishna gave us the sun, and intelligence to be able to, you know, have light bulbs and things, thanks to Thomas Edison and others who supported him and went on developing electricity and its different manifestations of light. So,
Yeah, if you look at, I think it's like North Korea or one of those countries. If you look at it on Google at night, it's just completely dark. And they say, people they like can't see themselves because the government makes them turn off all the lights. So if you
mm,
look at that like compared to like India or some other city, you can see all the artificial lights on the satellite. But like actually it is like that, at night normally it's so dark that you can't see yourself, but we have these artificial lights and we can see it.
yeah. So we gotta get out. And the funny thing is like, see, like somehow intuitively or just, I don't know, nature is that people are afraid of the dark, right? Like most people, they feel uncomfortable in the dark. Like you'll walk down a street in the daytime and you'll be fine. And as soon as it's dark, it's like, oh, anything can happen here now that it's dark because you can't see. It's kind of like fear of the unknown because you can't see what's going on there in the dark. But a lot of children too are like very afraid of the dark. So darkness means ignorance, and ignorance brings about fear. So knowledge counteracts ignorance and it also counteracts fear. So we really need to have knowledge to be able to navigate because that's the real light. Okay. So now Jeffrey's still scared of the dark. So now in the next section, yeah, Krishna is going to describe our predicament here as spiritual souls in this material life. So he described the material world, and now he's going to describe us as little souls here in the material world and what our situation is. So text 7. Mamaevamsho jivaloke jiva bhuta sanatana mama sastan indriyani prakriti stani karshati. Divya, are you ready to
Sure.
read?
Yeah. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. In this verse, the identity of the living being is clearly given. The living entity is the fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord eternally. It is not that he assumes individuality in his conditional life and in his liberated state becomes one with the Supreme Lord. He is eternally fragmented. It is clearly said, Sanatana. According to the Vedic version, the Supreme Lord manifests and expands himself in innumerable expansions, of which the primary expansions are called Vishnu Tattva, and the secondary expansions are called the living entities. In other words, the Vishnu Tattva is the personal expansion, and the living entities are the separated expansions. By his personal expansion, he is manifested in various forms like Lord Rama, Narsimhadev, Vishnumurti, and all the predominating deities in the Vaikuntha planets. The separated expansions, the living entities, are eternally servitors. The personal expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the individual entities of the Godhead, are always present. Similarly, the separated expansions of living entities have their identities. As fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, the living entities also have fragmental portions of his qualities, of which independence is one. Every living entity is an individual soul, has his personal individuality and a minute form of independence. By misuse of that independence, one becomes a conditioned soul, and by proper use of independence, he is always liberated. In either case, he is qualitatively eternal, as the Supreme Lord is. In his liberated state, he is freed from this material condition, and he is under the engagement of transcendental service unto the Lord. In his conditional life, he is dominated by the material modes of nature, and he forgets the transcendental loving service of the Lord. As a result, he has to struggle very hard to maintain his existence in the material world. The living entities, not only human beings and the cats and dogs, but even the greater controllers of the material universe, Brahma, Lord Shiva, and even Vishnu, are all parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. They are all eternal, not temporary manifestations. The word karsati, struggling or grappling hard, is very significant. The conditioned soul is bound up as though shackled by iron chains. He is bound up by the false ego, and the mind is the chief agent which is driving him in this material existence. When the mind is in the mode of goodness, his activities are good. When the mind is in the mode of passion, his activities are troublesome. And when the mind is in the mode of ignorance, he travels in the lower species of life. It is clear, however, in this verse that the conditioned soul is covered by the material body with the mind and the senses. And when he is liberated, his material covering perishes, but his spiritual body manifests itself in its individual capacity. The following information is there in the Madhyandinayana Shruti. Sava Esha Brahma Nishta Idam Shariram Martyam Atishrajya. Sorry. Okay. It is stated here that when a living entity gives up his material embodiment and enters into the spiritual world, he revives his spiritual body, and in his spiritual body, he can see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. He can hear and speak to him face to face. He can understand the Supreme Personality as he is. From Smriti, also, it is understood, Vasanti Yatra Purusha Sarve Vaikunta Murtaya. In the spiritual planets, everyone lives in bodies featured like the Supreme Personality of Godheads. As far as bodily construction is concerned, there's no difference between the part and parcel living entities and the expansions of Vishnumurti. In other words, at liberation, the living entity gets a spiritual body by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The word mame vamsha, fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, are also very significant. The fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord is not like some material broken part. We have already understood in the second chapter that the spirit cannot be cut into pieces. The fragment is not materially conceived. It is not like matter, which can be cut into pieces and joined together again. That conception is not applicable here because the Sanskrit word sanatana means eternal is used. The fragmental portion is eternal. It is also stated in the beginning of the second chapter that in each and every individual body, the fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord is present. Dehinosmin yatha dehe. That fragmental portion, when liberated from the bodily entanglement, revives its original spiritual body in the spiritual sky, in a spiritual planet, and enjoys association with the Supreme Lord. It is, however, understood here that the living entity, being the fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, is qualitatively one with the Lord, just as the parts and parcels of gold are also gold.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so Krishna is telling us, so what are we doing here in this material world? We're struggling very hard. Anybody out there struggling very hard in material existence? Everybody's just struggling. We're all struggling with what? With our minds and with our senses. So senses are demanding so many things, pulling us in all different directions. The mind is also dragging us here and there, distracting us, disturbing us, telling us a lot of things that aren't even true about ourselves and other people and life. And yeah, depending on whether the mind is influenced by the mode of passion or ignorance or goodness, then it's telling us different things and dragging us in different ways. And it's a struggle to just keep it all together, to keep from going insane, basically, getting overwhelmed or just stressed or depressed or whatever. So, yeah, everybody here in the conditional life is struggling. So he mentions two things here. The living end is in this conditioned world and due to conditioned life. So we're struggling due to conditioning because our pure consciousness, our real identity, our real eternal personality is covered by a lot of conditioning. And this conditioning causes us to think we're something that we're not, and think we need to do things that we don't really need to do, and think that we need to have things that we don't really need to have, and create so many self-created duties and artificial necessities, and yeah, basically spend our life chasing after useless things and struggling to get them. So, but Srila Prabhupada is saying that this is not who we are. We're struggling because we're forgetting we've forgotten who we really are. And if we just, by devotional service, by Krishna consciousness, by chanting Hare Krishna, by associating with devotees, by studying the scriptures, by surrendering to Krishna, then by the mercy of devotees in Krishna, then we can we can get purified of this conditioning, and we can revive our original Krishna consciousness. And then we can understand who we really are as eternal spiritual personalities, right? With eternal constitutional relationship with Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada is saying that not only that we're not these material bodies, but that we have a spiritual body, right? He says that when we give up this material embodiment and enter into the spiritual world, then we revive our spiritual body. And in that spiritual body, we can see the Lord in his beautiful transcendental form. We can see him face to face. We can hear him speak. He can hear us speak. We can have a conversation. We can interact with him. We can engage with him in activities, different loving exchanges, which he also reciprocates with. So, yeah, it's not that at any time we merge and become one with Krishna. So that's Prabhupada emphasizes that, because Krishna is also saying that we are his eternal fragmental parts. So it's never that we're eternally fragmented. We're eternally, a fragment means a part of something that is separated. So we're eternally separate individuals. And like right now, we have our individuality. And when we are liberated from this material body, it's not that the soul is going to go and just merge into a, cosmic spiritual soup and get blended up and become homogeneous or something. We're going to maintain our individuality, our personalities, our, unique qualities. And as individuals, we're going to interact with Krishna, the supreme individual person, and other individuals, his eternal associates, other liberated souls who are there in the spiritual world, who are also eternally fragmented parts. So, yeah, like Krishna said way back in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, text 12, 212 or 211, 212. He said, "Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future will any of us ever cease to be." And Prabhupada says that he's talking about how now we exist as individuals, and we existed as individuals in the past, and we will eternally be individuals. And just that when we go back to the spiritual world, we're going to be pure individuals with no material conditioning, with none of these false things, no false prestige, no false conceptions, no false association, no false desires. We're going to have pure, eternal, spiritual desires and associations and knowledge. So this is what we have to look forward to. Meeting Krishna face to face, interacting with him as a pure spiritual person with all divine qualities and yeah. Okay, any thoughts, questions about this or anything we've read today? Where's Pragati? Alia, yes.
Hare Krishna. I have a question. How to don't get trapped in the process of detachment? How doesn't get attached like again in the loop when you're trying to have the you are trying to go, we are in the battlefield field, and when we try to, for example, control the mind, have better habits, and follow the instructions of this map, follow the instruction of the map of the tree and what we have to do to cut it, how to don't get in the trap again, how to be sure you're making detachment and not get attached again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand your question. It's a very good question. So we take a lot of trouble to get detached from this material way of life. How do we avoid falling back into the trap, right? Getting entangled again. So a few things. One thing is that we need to be really consistent with our sadhana, right? That's why Prabhupada recommended 16 rounds every day. If we chant 16 rounds of Hare Krishna Maha Mantra every day, then that will keep us, it's like a vaccination, that prevents us from getting the disease. So even though we're walking through, a world that's full of disease, but if you've got the vaccination, you're not going to get sick. So yeah, he said two things. If we chant 16 rounds every day and take only Krishna prasadam, eat only food that's offered to Krishna. That's another thing that he said is like a vaccination, and that eating only food offered to Krishna it protects us from being influenced by material things and material desires arising again within the heart. And then, of course, a third thing is staying in good association, like was mentioned in one of these purports, right? Associate with devotees because we need friends, we need support in this life. So if we don't have devotee friends, we'll seek other kinds of friends who will drag us back into the material entanglement. So it's good to have nice devotee friends, devotee association, and also devotees, they can see when we're starting to maybe become slack or we're engaging a little bit too much, with our material desires and chasing after sense objects in the material world. And they'll be like, hey, you know what are you doing? You're really in mine, aren't you? Or whatever, hopefully they'll say it in a nicer way. But they'll basically, bring it to our attention because sometimes, Maya is very tricky and we don't even notice what's happening to us. We don't even notice how our consciousness is getting pulled away before it's too late. But if we have devotee friends who are, close to us, then they can observe these things and they can help us. We can raise a red flag, like, hey, be careful, looking like you're getting into dangerous territory. So that helps. And then also continuously hearing, right? Continuously practicing all the things that brought about our detachment in the first place, right? Studying the scriptures, hearing classes from senior devotees who have realized these things, and doing devotional service. All those things that brought about our detachment will ensure our continued detachment and increasing attachment to Krishna and Krishna's service. So really, those are the main things.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, I'm gonna have to wrap it up because I have to run to another outreach program now. But thank you so much for being here and taking part in this class. Bhagavad Gita ki jai.
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
And tomorrow's class, I don't know, I'll be flying. I'll be just landing in the airport just before this class time tomorrow. So we might, if we're gonna have class tomorrow, it's gonna have to be later. Maybe we'll start it an hour later. But let's see how things go. Okay, I'll let you know on the WhatsApp group. Jai.